During this video, I'm going to talk about Ldap and deferring authentication from the Niagara application onto a proper directory service like Active Directory or any of the other Ldap flavors out there. So, o- there's other things like SAML, but we're going to focus on Active Directory and Ldap. Particularly as it refers with how it's used with Windows servers. So in Niagara, as you all know, there's a small user database that one can use. But as the jobs get larger, or if the job is clearly an enterprise managed system, then it makes sense to integrate user access with the identity services already deployed on the enterprise. So because we're no longer going to be storing the user account information long term in Niagara, we're only going to cache it if we successfully get that information from the LDAP server. What we end up having to configure are these user prototypes. So LDAP user accounts are going to have user properties, much like Niagara user accounts do. One of those properties is going to be a group membership. Much like in Windows, users can be parts of members of different groups, and each group gets assigned a set of policies that give all the members of that group a set of common rights to access different network resources. Uh, in this case, what we want our users in Niagara to have is access to different resources within the station, and that's what we want to control. Now we know how to do that using the roles and the category server. So what we really need is for a way to associate the roles and categories in the Niagara station to a certain group membership that these users are going to have when they get cached in Niagara once they authenticate, right? So this setup here tells me that LDAP should have users that are going to be members of the engineers group and members of the operators group. If there's any user that manages to authenticate into Tritium because they're a user account in LDAP, but they're not a member of these groups, then automatically that user is going to be assigned all the properties in Niagara of the default prototype instead. So instead of having admin roles, for example, like this engineer user would have, the default prototype would not have roles assigned. And same thing, would not have enough file assigned. So let's also take a look at the LDAP scheme. By default, SSL is typically false and Active Directory is the default. If you are working with a Windows server, then this is typically okay, although it is extremely insecure. And it's the strong recommendation is to at the very least use SSL, because otherwise you're sending all the user information across the network in plain text. So, but let's go ahead and show how this may work one time, and let's forget that this can be done and never do it ever again. So here in this is my Active Directory Windows server. You can see that under the VTech domain, there's a BMS DDC organization unit that it has users, and one of the users under this organization units is Linda Smolinski, the user we're interested in, and we can see that she has um, all these different properties, some of which we're going to get when when this person signs into Niagara. But most importantly, she's a member of the engineers group in Ldap. So with all that, um, uh, I'm missing the domain, so gotta have the domain. Always something. Guess works because it's like we said, extremely insecure. So we don't want to do this. To log back out. So now we want to make sure that this is going to work with SSL. So we'll go ahead and try this again. Okay, that worked somehow. And let's see what happened with our certificates. So we have a fail certificate here. The reason for that is because the subject is our actual DNS for that server, but the host name did not match the subject name. All we would have to do is regenerate the certificate and add this host name and then in 636 to the alternative subject name fields. There's more than one that are allowed. So this 636 is just basically an appended there because that's the port number that Ldap over SSL uses. So we should approve that certificate so that we're able to continue to authenticate. So next, this is still actually quite vulnerable because this service does not have to authenticate into the LDAP server in order to extract user account information from it, even though it's encrypted. But there's nothing there to prevent any malicious actor to do the exact same thing. So we therefore want to use LDAP v3. And this came up recently, and it's the main reason why I'm doing this. Um, So VT Smolinski, this is a different user, which is actually, if we go back and look at Active Directory, you'll see that is not in the same organizational unit as the other users. And it doesn't have to be, but it does have to have enough access in the Active Directory domain in order to be able to authenticate into it and get user data from it. So that's the main thing this is doing here. This user could be a system admin that will never ever have to actually log into Niagara and do anything there. Therefore, it doesn't even have to be a member of any of these groups. And it's totally fine that if this person by mistake logs in or whatever, it goes to the default prototype. So it wouldn't really have any use for this application at all. So that's approved. So we can now just make sure that this still works. Cool. So we've shown all the three different ways that you can access Active Directory um, on a Windows server, going from the extremely most unsecure way to the most secure way and the best practice way, which is this last one we shown. So what happens if we need to troubleshoot our LDAP server? How do we get this information? You might be wondering, how do we come up with this? Well, for sure, this is constant. This will never change. But what about this? This would actually be just the host name of your, or the fully qualified domain name of your Windows server. So let's go over there. So you can see, just from looking at the connection on the RDP, this is the fully qualified domain name of this server here that we're in. Also notice how VT Smolinski is not in BMS DDC. It's not even anywhere here. It should, however, be under domain admins, and that's why it has access um, to be able to query LDAP here. So, what other tools do we have to query LDAP if something is going on with Niagara? Let's take a look at that. So the first tool that you will have on many Windows server is this thing called LDP. You can open up a connection. Um, Same thing, just this the name of your um, LDAP server, port number for SSL, same as Niagara. Okay, and here we're gonna get right off the bat information. So right here under service name, you could start to see that your what your domain controller name is. Um, we may be able to find some more information, and if not, then we will go ahead and bind. We'll use that user that allows us to authenticate into the LDAP server and query it. Okay, it says we're authenticated. So now we'll go ahead and view the tree. So here we can see this is our OU uh, and our uh, distinguished names here. If we come in here, we can see it more clearly. So this is where you can grab your information for where you want your users, which part of the LDAP server you want to get user data from, if you wanted to get that granular, right? So this is a way for you, for one, to verify this from this server to the LDAP server if Niagara is not working, and for you to also get organizational unit information, DC information, and that sort of thing. A the other tool that you can use for that. This one comes with sysinternals, which is a group of executables that Microsoft has been distributing for a very long time. AD Explorer, and same thing. You know, you just want to connect. Um, that's same thing. Host name for the LDAP server, VT Smolinski, the password. Hit OK. Then you've been here, and then you can parse through the directory and troubleshoot any issues or figure out any information you need to make your integration with Niagara work. Thank you so much. I hope you like this and this is helpful. Have a nice one.